Hi, and welcome again to the Path to Profit podcast. I'm here with my wife, Dr. Minette Riordan. I'm Brad Dobson, and we're thrilled to have Caitriona Reed with us today. Welcome, Caitriona.
Hi, thank you. I'm delighted.
So we're super excited to have Caitriona here, bringing a little bit different perspective than some of the guests that we've had recently. And some of the themes we're going to be talking about today are integration, one of my favorite topics, change, and the connection between bringing more spirituality into your work in the everyday. And Caitriona's perspective is really unique on this, about how there is no separation anymore. So you're going to hear some really, really juicy content.
I want to hear some of the Buddhism stuff.
And
too.
Some of the Buddhism and the mindfulness. And, we want to hear about your 5 changes. So we have a lot of information to connect with you all. And as always, we promise to bring great content as well as some fun giggles and some silliness to the conversation too. But first, let me share a little bit about Caitriona Reed with you. She has led trainings and retreats worldwide. Her listing in Wikipedia names her as an American Zen teacher in the lineage of Thich Nhat Hanh, who has dedicated her life to integrating authentic spiritual teaching with engagement in the real world. And world is in quotes, so we'll have to ask about that. She currently mentors successful business owners to step out beyond fear and to embody and be seen as the visionary and creative artists they are. And as you know, we always start each episode of the podcast with a quote, and this quote is from Caitriona. Caitriona writes, "When we dance at the dangerous edge of our creativity, we step into the life we imagine and help everyone move closer to the world that we long for." Caitriona, welcome. That's such a beautiful quote.
Thank you so much. I'm so honored to be speaking with you guys.
Awesome.
Super, super fun. And so tell us a little bit just about what's happening in your world and in your business right now. I know you have a lot going on. Tell us a little more about you and the work that you're up to.
Yeah, my partner and I, Michelle, Benjamin, Mickey, we've been running a retreat center for over 20 years now, and much of our work has centered around the kind of things we're able to do at a dedicated retreat center, somewhat remote, somewhat in the mountains. We basically have 18,000 acres of national forest at our disposal, which gives us a lot of room to create an environment for people, which is very different from their everyday. We were deliberate, actually, in choosing this place to find land that would do the work for us.
Nice.
So we have been, as you mentioned in the bio, we've been Buddhist teachers for many, many years. And then we had a major shift. Not that we stopped being Buddhist, but we really wanted to look beyond the standard practice of organized religion in general, and how that confines people to belief systems and assumptions that in many ways are really good. It's like training wheels. And then beyond that, it becomes restrictive. Yeah. And I think that's built into the mystical traditions, again, of all religions. But religion isn't so much our interest as the basic, the human. Call it spiritual, if you will. And you'd mentioned that thing about integrating spiritual practice with the quote, real world. I honestly feel I no longer understand the difference that we make between the real world, the spiritual world. Everything is real. And how we use that defines who we are, what we become, what we accomplish in the world. And so making that distinction, I'm looking at my screen backdrop, my Windows backdrop as I'm talking to you on this magical system is a picture of Yosemite. I mean, is that spiritual? I mean, it's real, it's rock, you can bash your head. So it's our perception that makes things spiritual or otherwise. And I've always felt that what we're really talking about and the work we do with our clients is about the kind of integration that allows for that bridge between the everyday, the mundane, the humdrum, and the profound experience of being a human being. 4.25 billion years it's taken for each of us to evolve into what we now are in this brief moment of our lifespan. And it would be a waste to put it into a box and say, well, I'm not spiritual, or I'm spiritual. It's almost laughable.
So I'm interested I'm interested that you mentioned working with business owners to step out beyond fear. And then you mentioned how you're working on that bridge between sort of the quote real world and the spiritual world, or integrating them. What are their fears as business owners, and what is it that how does what you do with working with the spiritual world help address those fears? Because I get the sense that it's a very different. It's not like, oh, I'm going to therapy to deal with my fears. You're doing something different.
Right. I love that. Well, if we're doing something different, I think it has to do with not addressing symptoms so much as addressing the system. I think we're all looking to be safe. That whether we're a business owner, whether we're a child going to a new grade or a new school at this time of year, a parent, someone facing the end of their life, every transition we experience in life is determined to a large extent to the degree to which we feel safe. And I think in the realm of business that applies too, because as we know, it's often celebrated that those people who are astoundingly successful are often those people who simply don't know fear. They won't listen in a negation inside. And anything is possible. We know that too, through classical teachings of Buddhism, through law of attraction teachings, that everything begins with a movement in the mind, and everything that is stopped or interrupted is interrupted from the naysaying voices in our mind. So I think fear, and as opposing that fear, that sense of building a sense of inner safety. You know, we talk about there's actually nothing that you can do that disqualifies you from life.
I love that.
We may certainly in the Judeo-Christian, the Abrahamic traditions, in some ways, in some places more strongly than others, this idea of original sin, that there's something inherently flawed and broken in us that has to be repaired. And I would take the opposite tack, that we're inherently whole, and all that we need to do is unlearn a few things to remove the obstruction, to remove the ignorance, if you will, that allows us the natural flow of our creativity, whether it's creativity or anything. You could say, you know, how do you teach a child mathematics? Do you give them this whole body of challenging stuff, or do you simply remove the obstacles that prevent them from engaging that creative flow that allows them to understand mathematics, whatever it is, life, business, math, painting? It's simply a question of tapping into what I really profoundly feel is an innate wholeness that we all possess, that we're born with. Before 250 billion years, we've learned a thing or two, generation by generation.
And so I'd love to just return to that concept of wholeness. You know, before we started the recording, we were talking about, and so the words I'm hearing: wholeness, integration, integrity, which also has its roots in wholeness. Can you talk a little bit about the power of integration and how that impacts the work you do? Because it's something that we see in our work with creatives, that they don't become truly successful in their business until they understand how to fully integrate all aspects of themselves into their business.
Totally. Yeah, totally. I feel that's it's so simple and it's so often missed. And you know, it's like anything, when you get it, it's like it's a no-brainer. And it's more than anything, I'm puzzled why we somehow are blocked or block ourselves from seeing that most obvious thing, that when we allow ourselves to do what we love, to have what we love, to just move forward, to know that it's within our range and within our grasp. And again, it comes down to fear and safety and blocking ourselves. Oh, I couldn't possibly do that. Well, who am I to do that? Yeah. So then maybe the question is how to get there, the steps to how to do that. Because the reward is so huge, and the vast majority of people are living as victims in some way, or construing the world in some way that then makes them the victim of something. Even if it's just of themselves. Well, there's something wrong with me. What's wrong with me? There's something I don't understand. I need more. And there are whole industries based on that assumption. Yeah, you need more. You need more of this, and you need to learn that. When, in fact, the most successful people have often known very little other than to trust that instinct toward wholeness, toward doing and embodying what enlivens them.
Yeah,
I think
so. Then it's the how. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, as what am I now? 48 years old, and I feel like I'm, especially in the last few years, gradually getting closer to owning a lot of who I am and having that come forward. And as someone who internalized a lot of that, being a victim or other things, sometimes those barriers to being your authentic self, being everything, your whole self, certainly from within, they can appear huge. It feels like a lot more than just tearing a Band-Aid off. And certainly, I mean, I'm blessed with all sorts of wonderful things around me. There are other people who have far more and far deeper problems with being a victim or having gone through a lot more things. So I'm interested in the part of how you're sort of able to short circuit that.
Right.
It's
right.
A lot of people struggle with that, and they even when they go and get therapized, it still takes a lot of time.
Well, and I think this is probably a great lead-in to talk about the work that you do in the world and about your 5 changes process and your whole belief about change.
Right. No, this is great. It's a great question. And I can draw a little bit from the analogy of Buddhist teaching and practice, where there is both, in across many traditions, there is both the understanding that realization and awakening comes in a lightning bolt flash, and it also takes many, many years of maturing into the realization of what that lightning bolt carried. So it's both a praxis, a long-term putting into practice what we understand and what we learn, and it's also an instantaneous experience. And I think so often that the world, and I don't want to make a blanket disparagement, but so much of the world of healing and therapy is based on an allopathic, symptomatic, what's wrong with you model, and tends to pathologize the problem, which inherently draws it out and makes it longer. Now, that's not fair to therapists who don't work like that, but the model itself is constructed around that, and it takes a long time. I think we're very fortunate, Michelle and I, in having had this very, very long background in Buddhist training and practice, and have really been exposed to the Buddhist superstars on the planet. Many years we spent with Thich Nhat Hanh and others in different lineages and different traditions.
That's cool.
And it's very cool and extraordinary. And then about 10 years ago, making a shift to something we'd also been doing for a long time as hypnotherapists, and deepening our work in neurolinguistics, in applied brain science, in hypnotherapy, and really looking at how the two were really very much enmeshed in terms of change happens, and how our unconscious mind, and I really like the word unconscious. Whatever we're not conscious of right now is unconscious, and there's an awful lot of it. It's as big as the wide world. And it's available to us, both literally in terms of what we can see and touch and travel to, but also internally, spiritually, if you will, in terms of what we have access to, wisdom, insight. It's also something that plays very much into the work that we do now in terms of rooting. We teach our clients and our students, it goes back to your earlier question around fear, we very much give people ways to know that they're not alone. Mm. When you're not alone, safety is that much more available, not only in the present in terms of mentorship, but in terms of the ancestry that we have, the collective wisdom of the planet, let's say.
I'm so glad you touched on that piece about feeling alone, because I find so many solopreneurs and creative entrepreneurs, artists, they do feel very isolated and alone, especially if they're moving from a corporate community-based working environment, and Brad's in this currently, right, to that space of they feel so alone at home behind their computers, and that aloneness is both inner and outer is what I hear you saying. So not only are they not having physical contact with people, but they're then also having to confront internally all the fears that are coming up as they venture out, putting themselves out into the world in a bigger way.
Right. Well, yeah, and I think the answer to that is to find ways to not be alone, which some of that is social. It's not surprising that social media is just expanding. Not that necessarily helps. So the risk of sounding Pollyannish, just to go out and look at the ocean or the sky or the night sky or take a walk in the woods, to get a bigger picture, to get that sense of 4.25 billion years, and we've all been at it together through different iterations, from phytoplankton on up to human being. And perhaps that's part of the problem too, that we think of it as a hierarchy, and we think we're at the knife edge forward thrust, and we're not. That there is wisdom embedded in our past that we can draw from. I'm actually studying a little biochemistry at the moment for my own pleasure and amusement, and I'm just in awe at how cells are structured and the evolutionary process that makes us as organisms, that makes us as resilient as we are.
It's insane.
It's miraculous. It's incredible. Yeah.
There's a great, there's a recent Radiolab podcast. I think it's Radiolab.
About the trees.
It was about how the original cells came to be, where it's actually sort of a virus infecting a cell type of thing, and then that,
Radiolab is an awesome podcast.
Yeah, it's a fun one.
Yeah, and talk about not being alone. Half our body mass is not human; it's bacterial and viral. So, in other words, and not like hitchhikers, but as part of the function of our brain, of our nervous system, of every organ in our body.
Right.
It's like, talk about community. There are 100 trillion beings walking around inside our skin, which to all biological purposes are separate living beings. I mean, none of us would exist alone. And when I first learned that, I thought, God, I'll never be alone again. Hi, guys. What are we going to do today? All 100 trillion of us. What are we going to do for fun today?
It kind of it really reinforces the basis of Buddhism in terms of interconnectedness, and it just, in fact, it tremendously reinforces. They got it right.
Yeah, and we talk about this, and it sounds sort of kind of curious and quaint and interesting, but my interest is how to help people really embody this understanding so that it informs them as they sit at their desk. It informs them as they walk down the street. I'm really looking to help. I've never said this before, but I'm really looking to turn people into mystics, if you will, poets, artists. It's all the same to me. Yeah. How do you paint a picture without being a mystic in some way? To recognize that something within your body, not just within your visual body, but in your the whole kinesthetic of your body, to take that out and put it onto a canvas or a piece of paper how to do that as a lifestyle, which again, I think it's part of our heritage as human beings. We're all artists, poets, musicians. We were born to play, and part of that play is our business. Unfortunately, such are the times and the structure of society that we separate that out and make that something different.
So I'm going to interject here. I know she was going to say something. I'm fascinated by this. So I'm always pretty grounded in the practical things. And so when you mentioned how someone can take your training and teaching and bring that to their business, what's a practical example? So I'm going to go off to my desk, and Manette's going to go off to her desk, and I'm going to work on a Facebook ad, or I'm going to work on writing an email, or we're working on this podcast. How does the rubber hit the road in terms of someone who has been helped by you integrating that spiritual wholeness? What does that mean when they're in business?
Well, good question. And first a metaphor and then a story. The metaphor would be if you're walking along the road and, a long journey, a big hike from one part of your life to the next. And everything was fine, except you had a stone in your shoe. It was really uncomfortable. And you could say, well, I'm going to tough this out. And they told me this journey would be hard. And I understand there are going to be things like this happening. And, the stone creates a blister. I mean, you can imagine hiking for several days with a stone in your shoe. Or you could stop and unlace the shoe and take out the stone and then continue on your journey. And the stone really doesn't have anything to do with the journey, except it has everything to do with the journey once it's out of your shoe. Mm. So an example would be many years ago, I had a client who had many presenting issues, was basically very unhappy, was I think a fourth generation stockbroker, and felt the huge pressure of having to carry on that tradition, felt pressured by the family, was really miserable. And he wanted to travel. He had a strong calling to go to Japan. And all I did was, in maybe 3 sessions, provide him the contact to get there, to go there. A couple of years later, he came to visit with his fiancée, Japanese fiancée. He was now pretty much fluent in Japanese. He'd opened a language school. He'd started a new life. And he came back to visit us and to ask us to perform his wedding ceremony.
Oh, wow.
Which we did. And so I did nothing except open the door for him to leave where he was unhappy and go and live the life that was the fulfillment of who he was. How he went about setting up his business school, business practices in Japan, is nothing I know. I don't know anything about that, but I didn't need to, because he was now in a position where the flow was such that he could do that with efficiency, with speed. I do my best to keep away from giving business advice. So I've been an entrepreneur for such a long time sometimes, and learn from some very well-accomplished people in this industry. So I can do that. But my work with clients is not necessarily to do that until we've worked, we've cooked a while, and then they're friends. And I can say, well, how about changing your website? It looks like it's a mess, or whatever.
Sure.
But those details are not my forte. Well, maybe they are, because I'm a graphic artist too. But what you hear what I'm saying?
Yes.
It's resetting at the core, creating those conditions that allow that person to move forward with a sense of purpose and safety. It's really and not being a victim, living at choice, living at cause.
You help them know that there's a rock in their shoe, and you help them get rid of it. Exactly. Yeah.
And I wanted to go back to what you said before Brad popped in, because the piece that really resonated with me, and part of the core message of our business and being on the path to profit, is that it has to involve play. And so when Brad asks, how can I go sit at my desk? Ask yourself, how can I sit at my desk and approach this from a place of play? And for me, if I think about some of the great Buddhist stories and Zen koans, and there's so much humor in Buddhism, right? And irony and satire and so many other things. And I think that we've lost our belief that business can be playful. And I think, and creative. I can't tell you how many people come to our events, and I'm sure to your retreats as well, they don't even know that they have a deep longing to reconnect to their creative core. And yet it's what happens. Even though they come thinking, oh, I'm going to get a mindset shift and I'm going to figure out how to make money and do marketing, the work that we do is similar to yours in that all we're doing is reminding them of who they are and how much access they have to this concept of play and creativity. But I really want to hear about your 5 changes.
Well, we've talked about the first of the 5. And, I'd mentioned before that 5 is a number of change. So in a way, it's redundant. 5 changes. 5 means change. And we tried to make a neat little list, but never could quite manage to come up with something. It would always keep changing. The one thing we can start with is what we spoke about before, that shift from being looking for excuses, looking to blame other people for our predicament, and really taking responsibility and figuring out, where can I go from here? This is what I have. Now what can I use, or how can I use this to move forward with this, rather than looking to accuse or blame or ascribe. And another piece we talked about too, which has to do with the fact that we are each a unique masterpiece, and our soul, for want of a better word, our essence, our core, this unique expression of life on planet Earth that's taken all this billions of years to cook. It's what are you going to do with your one rare and precious life? As
my favorite poem by Mary Oliver. Yes.
Yeah. And to really come from that place, because I think that question itself is going to enable that playfulness. It's like, if you need to go outside and take a walk, do that. Forget about your social media calendar. Just be well. Whatever it takes to be well, because it's from that place of wellness. And once we acknowledge bless you, by the way.
Thank you.
Once we acknowledge that essential wholeness, that essential masterpiece, I think we can play better.
Yeah, I love that. So why is the concept of change important? So in and of itself, change is a scary topic for some people.
Yeah.
Others embrace it. So why does change matter?
So for myself, I'm a woman of transgendered experience, which means I grew up as a little boy and now I'm a woman. A 9-year-old asked me yesterday, why do you sound like a boy? And I said, well, that's just the way it is.
Great answer.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't know what change means from that point of view. There's a lot of it about, change.
Yeah.
And it comes upon us unasked for. 10 years ago or so, we were, I won't say stuck, but we were very much not changing. We were caught in our role as Buddhist teachers. And the change came about because we're both artists, the natural restlessness for something new, some challenge to push forward, to figure out how can we do this better, or how can we do this in a way that's more effective. And we changed our business, and it wasn't particularly easy. We created misunderstanding and a sense of betrayal on the part of some people. And that's what I think we're afraid of. When change confronts us, it won't work. People won't understand us. It's foolish. I have a friend who started a school for wizards. This was a marketer, a branding expert. And he just decided, I'm going to start a school for wizards.
Nice.
And he's sort of doing what he's always been doing in a way. Don't you love that? Everyone wants to become part of that.
Yes.
We're doing the same in a way. It's a school of magic that we're doing. It's psycho magic. And that's one of the changes too, to to recognize that there is magic afoot. Change happens naturally. There's a quote from Arthur C. Clarke, approximately, any technology sufficiently advanced enough has the appearance of being magic.
You bet.
Yeah.
And so whether that's a hard technology, like the technology we're using to speak to each other, or whether that's a mind technology as we learn more and more about the brain. And I don't want to put too much on modern brain science because it's really showing us what we already know, or what we've already known instinctively. But as we refine our skills, both in terms of organizing our society and in terms of organizing the organism of ourselves and how we interact with each other, I just feel we're learning more and more. We're moving forward, and that invites change. And it's almost an obligation. It's part of the game, part of the play of life. That oh, let's try this. Why don't we paint that wall orange and put white, yellow, and green stripes on it? Those thoughts are just, that's who we are. Why don't we?
I love that.
Why don't we build a door, or why don't we take down the door, and so change is our blood, our breath.
I love that. And so part of that shift in your business 10 years ago, away from being spiritual teacher to becoming a business and mindset mentor, I know was a big shift. And I'm curious, so from an entrepreneurial perspective, what have been some of the rocks in your shoes along your journey, and what are you most proud of that you and Michelle have created?
Well, what we're most proud of is coming back to where we started and saying, yeah, we are Buddhist teachers, we're spiritual teachers. And what was challenging was to try to cut out part of who we were in order to do what we thought was more effective marketing.
Yeah.
So I think...
Can you say a little bit more about that? Because I think it's a great example for people to hear.
Yeah, it comes down to what we were already speaking about, trying to market somebody other than who you are.
Yeah.
Trying to fit into some idea of, I had a student years and years ago who was quite a successful painter, gallery painter, and she would make paintings according to what the experts figured would be the market next year.
Right.
And she was successful as a painter, but she was dead as an artist and as a human being. I mean, dead might be a bit extreme, but in my
that's probably how she felt inside.
Yeah, and that's what marketing does. If it's not based on something essentially intact within you. Some of the most successful people that we know or that exist in the world that we share are people who just, hey, I'm just going to go ahead and do it anyway. And the word is out. So many people say that, and so many of us have been afraid to trust that, partly because, I think, two reasons. One was the safety, a sense of fear, and the other was not quite sure who I am yet. Who am I? I mean, I'd love to just be myself and create a life and work and business and everything around that, but who am I? And we're all so many things that sometimes you can't catch it. It's like trying to put your hand on a grasshopper. You can't quite put your hand over it because it's always changing into something else. So to dig deeper to find an essential core underneath that, because none of us fit into easy, I don't, most of us, let's say, just don't fit into easy boxes.
Yeah.
And more so.
True. That's so true. Would you share about that book, the Buddhism book you were reading about the authenticity is?
Oh yeah. It's a Suzuki quote, Suzuki Roshi. But it's that authenticity is the only true authority, or is its own true authority. So, and this comes up for us when we're talking, or for us personally, but also when we're talking to, or when we're marketing, when we're talking to our clients about their own leadership, their own marketing, their own way in business, and their own way of connecting with their clients. You can, or speaking on the stage, if you're authentic, people they get that at more than an intellectual level, and you can be an authority in anything if you're authentic. And I think you probably much more than I understand what it means to be completely authentic, because you're talking about it from a very whole perspective. But yeah, I read that just the other day, and it's been on my mind every day. It's something to think about.
It's very, very much a piece of the Zen traditions in particular, implicit in all of Buddhist teaching. And it puts me in mind of a story of a student who came to see a great, well-known teacher and said, I've had these experiences. I've had these incredible openings and awakenings, and recognizing the interconnectedness and the essential emptiness of everything, just mind-blowing experiences. And the teacher just says to him, "Show me." Until that's embodied in some authentic body, it's fine, because we not just intellectually, we can have profound, call them spiritual openings, and it's that movement toward really integrating them so they show in your breath, in your words, in your being. It doesn't mean Zen masters don't have bad days, by the way, but still, that's being authentic too, isn't it?
Yeah. It is. And so before we run out of time, I would love for you to share with people about your amazing retreat center and some of the work that you and Michelle are doing there, as well as where can we go to get more information about connecting with you?
Oh yeah, sure. Thank you. Well, the information can be found at 5 Changes, FIVECHANGES, 5changes.com. Both our calendar, which actually will have a few more things on it than is currently there, because we have a couple of retreats later in the year. We have one coming up this coming weekend. I'm now speaking the week before Labor Day, so this may be past by the time this airs. But
it'll be past by then, but it'll give people a sense of the work you do. Mm-hmm.
Early November, we have a creativity retreat, and then over the New Year period, we have a
retreat.
I
go?
Yes, you're down. Yeah, it'll be fun. It'll be great. It'll be an everything retreat. And we do have an audiobook, audiobook with some recorded exercises that really lie in some ways our conversation, delightful as it is. Like any of these conversations, we can't really give people the experience of some of the ways that we can create magic in the mind, heart, mind, soul, call it what you will. And in that audiobook, we do guide people through 3 very, very simple, disarmingly simple, so simple that you might miss them unless you repeat them a couple of times. So I would recommend go to 5changes.com, download that audiobook and ebook, and do those 3 exercises more than once, and see if you can adapt them to your own particular needs. You might find they're more powerful than at first it seems. So,
I love that. That's super intriguing, and now you've totally piqued my curiosity. I'm ready to go download it now. And again, that website address is 5changes.com, and it's spelled out FIVE changes.com.
And we'll have that all in the show notes as well. So awesome.
So awesome. So any last words of wisdom, especially for creative entrepreneurs that are on the journey with the rock in their shoe? What's your favorite nugget you want to share?
Well, first I want to thank you both for this delightful conversation, for the work that you both do in the world. One nugget is keep tuning into this podcast, because it's great.
Thank
you. Let's see. Well, you can do it. It's like for so long I thought I was broken. And no one is broken. I thought there was something I wasn't getting that everybody else was somehow getting. And like I said before, nothing can disqualify you from living an outrageously brilliant, exuberant, joyful life. Because, well, I'll just say this. When I became ordained officially as a Zen teacher, somebody asked my teacher, Thich Nhat Hanh, so how do you know when someone's ready? How do you know when someone's qualified to be a teacher? And he said, well, when they're happy. I thought that was a good criterion. And it was a bit tongue-in-cheek, because there are a few other things involved. But still, unless you're happy, none of it's going to work.
Right.
So what makes you happy, and follow that, and then build the rest from there.
Great stuff.
So beautiful. I could talk to you for hours, Caitriona. Fabulous conversation. Hopefully we'll have you back again to continue this conversation. It was really awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you
both so much.
Thank you. That was great.
So I'm Minette Riordan. This is Brad Dobson. We're the Path to Profit podcast. You can find out more about us and the work we are up to in the world at pathtoprofitacademy.com. And we'll see you on our next podcast where we're going to be talking to Kimmy, or they'll hear us or see us or whatever. Choices are good. We're going to be talking to Kimmy Avery about relationships and building business relationships that last. So it'll be another great conversation. Again, Caitriona, thank you.
Take care.
Thanks. Bye.
Don't end the meeting, just